Hello and welcome to the Amateur Austenite. My name is Frances Duncan. I'm an author and the founder of the Jane Austen Society of New Zealand. My co-host is my friend Sean.
Hello.
And today we are going to do a sum up of Persuasion by Jane Austen. Oh God, now I realise I have to do a summary of all of Persuasion.
Here we are. This is what we'll do. We can read the back of the book.
Okay, off you go.
8 years ago, Anne Elliot and Frederick Wentworth fell head over heels in love, but Anne's snobbish family put a stop to their engagement, believing the young naval captain wasn't good enough for her. Well, actually, it was really Persuasion from Lady Russell, a sort of substitute mother. Pretty intelligent, Anne soon realises it was a terrible mistake and spends her 20s in the shadow of her father and selfish sisters. But she never forgets. And then Captain Wentworth, by now a successful, wealthy man, looking for a wife, walks back into her life. Can he forgive her? Does he still love her? And could they ever be happy after all this time? By turns achingly sad and intensely romantic, Persuasion is the ultimate wish-fulfillment novel about love lost and regained. It's a true Cinderella story for anyone who's ever felt overlooked or anyone who's ever had their heart broken.
I mean, I agree with some of that.
But they are making it a bit of a romance style for the modern audience.
Should we do the back of my book?
Yes.
This is the Penguin Classic version. At 27, Anne Elliot is no longer young and has few romantic prospects. Well, that's not a very nice way to start, is it?
But actually, it's probably more honest.
Okay. 8 years earlier, she had been persuaded by her friend Lady Russell to break off her engagement to Frederick Wentworth, a handsome naval captain with neither fortune nor rank. What happens when they encounter each other again is movingly told in Jane Austen's last completed novel. Set in the fashionable societies of Lyme Regis and Bath, Persuasion is a brilliant satire of vanity and pretension, but above all is a love story tinged with the heartache of missed opportunities.
That is a much better précis. This is we now want to resell this as a romance novel. That is much more of the time.
Sian has got a very modern version of Persuasion, and its subtitle is A Classic Romance. And in the back of it is discussion questions, which we thought we might do for today.
So there's some quotes about what others said. So in Persuasion, Jane Austen writes, she'd been forced into prudence in her youth. She learned romance as she grew older, the natural sequel of an unnatural beginning. And in the margin of her own copy of the book, Jane's beloved sister Cassandra intriguingly wrote next to this line, "Dear, dear Jane, this deserves to be written in letters of gold." And what a reader today says, Captain Wentworth is the romantic hero as far as I'm concerned. This is a modern reader, of course. Darcy can keep his breeches to himself. Here's this big, scary guy who wields the power of life and death over hundreds of men on board ship, but is reduced to a blithering wreck by this tiny woman. In the end, he lays down all his defences and admits how he feels and how stupid he's behaved in the loveliest of love letters. Perfect. Why do I love Jane Austen? I'm not sure how she'd have felt about this, but I'd love to go for a drink with her. She knows exactly how women think. We all like to imagine we're emancipated, but all we actually want is a gorgeous man to adore us for who we are and not how we look. Not 100% sure with that line.
I mean,
we all
I
want
don't
to
think
be.
She's wrong.
No, but I think all we actually want is for someone to adore us for who we are and not how we look.
Oh yeah, he doesn't have to be gorgeous.
And he doesn't have to be a hunk. And he doesn't even have to be a he now.
Nope, definitely not.
It's a gorgeous someone.
That's someone we find gorgeous.
Yes. The reading group questions for Persuasion. Persuasion is said by some to be Jane Austen's most romantic book. Others think it is a sad, rather autumnal book about missed opportunities. Jane Austen wrote it at the end of her life. Which view do you take, if any? Do you think either is correct? What is your response to Anne Elliot's story?
So the first bit, is it a romantic book or is it sad autumnal, a book about missed opportunities? Well, can it not be both? It is about missed opportunities. There is quite a bit of sadness in it, but it is also romantic. They do have their happy ending. They do get back together. It is about that they missed each other at one point, but it's also about their reconciliation.
And it's also about looking back at the time and that missed opportunity may have been the right thing at the time, though neither could truly see it. And there was a painful period. But, hindsight, even as we mentioned in the last chapter, Mrs. Croft was saying about the imprudence of young people getting married without making sure they had some security behind them. And that would have been the situation, because he was only a lieutenant at that point, not a captain as well, wasn't he?
I thought he was a captain.
No, he wouldn't have been a captain I don't think he was a captain until he won the ship, because he was only very young. So I think you're right. I think it's a bit of both. Sad autumnal sort of, you get the feeling that she's still gazing at him at a distance and never reconciled. That's two extreme views.
What was your response to Anne Elliott's story?
I loved it. I did. I really enjoyed it. But, those times you so wanted to hit Mary.
I wished that Anne would advocate for herself more, but I also understand the times and her position in her family, feeling like she couldn't. And to be fair, I don't always advocate for myself as much as I should, so I do understand it. But it can be quite frustrating to read.
But she was the one that would have to live with the consequences of 3 of them, making her life pretty miserable, all with words. And words can be very, very hurtful. I thought she became quite assertive during the course of this book. She wouldn't let her father stop her from going out to see Mrs. Smith, for example.
This is true. But then she was also very aware she was in the right. And I think that makes a big difference. When it came to Captain Wentworth, she was persuaded by Lady Russell to break off the engagement because she thought it was the right thing to do. It was right for him to not be dragged down by her.
When she rejected him, she wasn't necessarily thinking of it was safer for her. She was thinking it was better for him not to have a wife as a charge, particularly going into battle and worrying about what might happen to him. It may have changed his behaviour. There is always that risk of him being less daring and less brave.
In the extended Musgrove family, who has the higher social standing and who has the lowest? Does this reflect in their characters? Do we still view and rank people by their social standings? What do you think of the formal and generally well-accepted way in which they practice this?
In theory, Mr. and Mrs. Musgrove, senior, would have been the highest social standing. Because they were the landed gentry, they were the seniors, they were the elders, they were the owners of the property. He was.
They were the heads of the family, but because Mary is the daughter of a baronet, technically she has a higher social standing than them.
But she's married down.
But she's still the daughter of a baronet. So technically she is still above them, and that's why she kept insisting that she be first. And Henrietta even says, no one doubts that it's her right to take precedence. We recognise she is of higher social standing than our parents, but we still don't think she should insist on trying to take precedence over them all the time, because this is their home and their family.
And it's actually a total lack of respect. Yes, so does this reflect in their characters? Well, it doesn't reflect well on Mary at all. Do we still view and rank people by their social standings?
If you think of social standings now as popularity, celebrities are now seen as a rank above us.
And most of them, after all, do also have an awful lot of money. And many of them come from moneyed families, because how can they get into that environment if they don't have the backing?
Very much so.
Whether we respect them is another matter. It doesn't matter in the sense that, society still seems to venerate them.
I think the Musgroves are really interesting to look at when it comes to social standing, because they don't really care about it.
I think they care in the right way. They care in the sense that their social standing gives them obligations to look after their property and to look after it well, to look after their friends, to be respectful of their friends. And that shows with the relationship with Henrietta's fiancé, Hayter. He's not necessarily well off. They're not too worried about that.
She loves him, and that's what's more important.
That's what's more important. And he's a respectable man. He's got a good prospects.
The Harvilles are a good example to look at when it comes to the Musgroves as well. Mary looks down her nose at them, very much so. But the Musgroves welcome them in as family friends and take the burdens off their hands. And it looks like they're going to be very good family friends for the rest of their lives.
That's so true, because they recognise, they didn't take for granted the care the Harvilles gave to Louisa. And as you said, they took burdens off them where they could. to minimise that, because it was a small house. It's not as if they had a lot of money, and Harville is an invalid. But they didn't do it in a patronising manner. It was very respectful and appreciative. That's the difference. They might be rough around the edges, but their hearts are absolutely in the right place. Their heart and souls are in the right place. I think sometimes that's part of the message you get from Jane's books. She actually doesn't venerate the gentry, the upper gentry at all, or the aristocracy. It's quite obvious, and I would suggest probably from her observations and her understanding that there was, particularly in those days, there were very good landlords and there were some particularly bad landlords. There was people very set, and then I should wonder how much of her was influenced by some of her sister-in-law's behaviour.
Elizabeth, who was married to Edward, did not like Jane and, from all accounts, didn't really like the family, looked down on them.
And also made it quite difficult, I think, for her husband to be generous. Discuss the character of Anne Elliot. Is she a conventional romantic heroine? Do we see her as the characters in a novel see her? Is the story seen through her eyes? If not, how not? Is she a conventional romantic heroine? Well, what's conventional these days?
A strong, independent woman?
Having sex every night with the most gorgeous hunks?
Well, she's not doing that.
No, she's definitely not. And could not describe her as an independent woman. Strong? She's got an inner strength, but it doesn't come out so much at the beginning. I think she finds her strength over time. Her strength manifests itself at the point Sir Eliot and Elizabeth have to cut their cloth and move together, because now they're seen for what they are, which really is, the emperor with no clothes. All of his vaunted breeding, he actually wasn't capable of preserving and increasing the estate value, which really was his job to hand on to the next generation.
Being that she comes from a wealthy family, in theory, wealthy family, that tends to be conventional for particularly this time period. Her family being in dire straits is not conventional. There was sort of a theme of idealised woman being the heroine. I remember reading an article about it, comparing Jane and Lizzie Bennet, and saying that Jane was more the traditional heroine of the times, who was perfectly beautiful and perfectly good.
Passive. The heroines, quite often in those days, were relatively passive. Things happened around them, but they didn't actively do much, except fainted.
And to a certain extent, Anne fulfills that stereotype. She is very good, but she does have a backbone.
And she demonstrates it actually not on behalf of herself, but on behalf of others.
Where it really counts.
Yes.
The second question is, do we see her as characters in the novel see her? No, I don't think so, because we get a little bit of a look into her inner life.
To be honest, her father and her sisters have no idea what she's thinking. They've got no idea of her at all. They don't see all these musings and the decisions that she makes. I think they all see her from...
what use she can be to them?
Well, they can only see the outer surface, can't they? And unless they are naturally insightful and understand. So, for example, I would argue that, obviously, Frederick's got to understand her much better by the end of the book than he did at the beginning. But I would argue that Mrs. Smith knows her quite well, understands her character, obviously because she knew her as a young child. So she's seen her through different iterations. She knows how she is very careful what she says, never condemns anybody. I think Mrs. Croft, actually, in some respects, probably sees her more truly than many.
She certainly sees her value.
Very quickly, and also I think sees that she does still have a tender for her brother.
Her family sees her as useless or annoying or as someone to be used for a certain purpose.
Yeah, I don't think they see her as useless or anything so much. Only in as much as she's not capable of attracting, neither was Elizabeth, retaining them, a wealthy suitor, and also bringing honour to their name. So she didn't fit their mould of behaviour. But she was very useful around the house for doing all those useful things. Even though they might say she was useless, they knew damn well she wasn't.
Although Anne and Captain Wentworth have not seen each other for 7 years, their feelings are as strong as ever. Do you think this is realistic? Do you think today's society would support this kind of constancy? Does it make the central story less relevant, or does it make it timeless?
I think we've seen enough stories of elderly couples getting back together with their first loves to know that that first love can be something very, very special.
My grandmother's second husband was someone she had known when she was a lot younger. I don't know if they ever had a thing, but it was more he wanted to look after her.
Which is not itself, isn't that love in its own way?
Yeah. He's like, I can't stay over and look after you if we're not married. Even though they were in their late 70s.
I think that's lovely.
It was. They had about 10 years together, which was really beautiful. You do hear a lot of stories, you know, the internet connects people who haven't seen each other in years and years.
Yes, there was a little bit of a blip, wasn't there, I think, and people suddenly catching up with old flames when Facebook first came out, particularly.
Yes, people do grow and change a lot, and you could argue that people do that more now because life is so changeable and there are so many different pressures than there were during the Regency period, where it seemed like life was pretty same, but that could be just looking at it from a modern eye, and actually I could be completely wrong. So I think we think, yes, it is realistic that they could still be in love. It could be harder in today's society to have that kind of constancy with the availability of people.
That's very true. Jane Austen's brother Henry gave Persuasion its title after Jane's death. What is the significance of the title Persuasion, and does it have a positive or negative connotations?
We were just discussing this in the cancelled chapter because persuasion actually crops up in that chapter, the word several times. I'm not sure if it crops up anywhere else in the novel at all. I think the main persuasion they're talking about here is Anne being persuaded by Lady Russell to give up her engagement to Frederick 8 years ago. I'm not sure there's really any other persuasion that happens during the novel, or have I missed the point entirely?
I'm just trying to think of the use of the word persuasion when we talk about people who are of a particular persuasion. You know, it's a phrase that one often hears, of a particular persuasion, of a particular mode of thought or personality or type or something. Not that I'm sure how it would influence how the books is.
The mythos around it is that Jane had planned to call it the Elliots.
Which is probably a pretty boring standard title, is it not? And maybe, in fact, that Persuasion is he was publishing this more closer to the getting into the Victorian type era. Mind you see, all her novels in the end had titles that were linked to a particular attribute or verb or what have you, rather than after a family, didn't it?
Well, no, we've got Emma and Mansfield Park and Northanger Abbey. So
that's true.
So half of them do.
I was thinking immediately, of course, of Sense and Sensibility and Pride and
Prejudice, yeah.
Northanger Abbey, I can understand why they potentially kept that, because it has a sort of gothic feel to it, which the book itself has a sort of
It was originally going to be called Susan, because Catherine Morland was Susan.
That wouldn't work.
You don't think so? I think it was very much the style of the time.
To name books after people, yes.
And focus on her being a heroine. I don't know about the title Persuasion. It's what we've always known, so it's kind of hard to comment on. I kind of like the idea of it being the Elliots if it started and closed with Sir Walter entering the marriage into the book, the baronetage, because it is telling a chapter of the Elliot family saga. It's almost like the rise and fall of the Elliots. Will they ever come back into possession of Kellynch?
No. He'll never cut his cloth. Unless Elizabeth managed to somehow
marry someone very rich.
He'd probably also have to be very old. Because by now she's getting very long in the tooth.
29.
For that period. And she has a reputation now, I would imagine, as being not a very pleasant.
How important is Kellynch Hall? Does it act as the focal point of the novel or merely as a plot device?
I think merely a plot device, really.
So the most recent adaptation of Persuasion actually ends with Captain Wentworth buying Kellynch Hall.
It does, doesn't it?
And taking Anne there and drawing that circle background, which is kind of closing off her world rather than opening it up like he's supposed to.
I much prefer the adaptations where She gets on a ship and she goes and sees the world with him, which is really what she's always wanted to do. She wants to know it's looked after, and I think she's comfortable that the Admiral is doing a good job of that.
Very much so. She says that they that should be gone are gone, and they that are meant to stay are there. I really wrangled that quote. To a certain extent, yes, it is a plot device. It brings the Crofts into her life, which then brings Captain Wentworth back into her life.
It brings them back at a level where then Sir Eliot can't really look down on them too much, even though they are his tenants, because they are the tenants of his hall and they're actually paying for its upkeep. He made very sure they would. And he is a gentleman now. For all he might be rough of face, he is a gentleman now, because as an admiral, the title admiral is a very honourable title.
When Mary's thinking about rank, she puts it that admiral was about the same level as baronet.
A baronet's not high. I mean, he's the lowest of the aristocracy. It's not just a sir without a property. You're obviously less. Kellynch was what actually made Sir Eliot, but he threw it away in his vanity, or let it go in his vanity. Everything's a plot device when it boils down to it, doesn't it? It's not the central character, but it certainly it represents a lot.
There has to be a certain amount of plot device going on because Anne will not act for herself. Things have to force her into action. She's not going to seek out Captain Wentworth. He's not going to fall into her lap. I mean, if that hadn't happened, none of the novel would happen.
So does Austen respect the rigid late 18th century Regency class structure, or does she seek to subvert such traditions in Persuasion?
A lot has been said about this, because this novel plots the rise of several people. We were talking about the Admiral, we're also talking about Captain Wentworth. Sir Walter talks about an admiral that he had to give way for, and he said we knew that his father was a curate who didn't have enough bread to eat. So I think Jane Austen is looking at people rising in the ranks through merit rather than through luck of birth.
Because that's the only thing Eliot has going for him, and a pretty face.
And as we pointed out earlier, she thinks the Admiral and Mrs. Croft are better qualified to run Kellynch than her father, who was born into it.
Which rather begs the question, just what did he grow up with? You don't hear much about the grandparents at all, do you?
We don't hear anything about the grandparents, which is a shame. It's possible there were some issues with his upbringing, but it also could be that he was just a self-centered brat. Look at Tom Bertram in Mansfield Park, and then you look at Edmund, and they're entirely different characters with the same upbringing. Sir Thomas in Mansfield Park is trying to teach his son how to manage the family, how to manage the estate. And Tom is not interested. This was one of the jobs of the oldest son. They had to learn from their father how to manage the estate respectably, how to grow the estate. And it's obvious Sir Walter did not learn, whether it was tried to be taught to him or not.
He did enough just to keep it going. But in these trying times, he didn't actually do enough to keep it growing. And that was going to bite him in the bum at some point in the future. And it has. Essentially, his status has dropped. Now he's revealed for what it is, which was all illusion. He goes to Bath, but he's now no longer the big fish in the small pond. He's just another little fish, and he's following the Dalrymples like a dog, like a lap puppy. And he couldn't go back to Kellynch now. He couldn't afford to go back to Kellynch. He'd have to buy out the lease.
We knew that if he followed the restrictions that Anne recommended, it would take them 7 years to get out of debt. That is a very long time. We don't know how long it will take them to get out of debt with them living in Bath.
Well, it depends how much he does his spending, of course, but they are reduced costs. There's more costs in terms of entertainment, but he doesn't have the travelling expenses. He doesn't have the expenses of carriages in the same way.
And running a huge estate.
And he's getting income from somebody who's running his estate far better, allowing someone else to manage the estate without pulling on it all the time.
Well, because that was the other thing that landlords could do, that estate owners could do, would be raise their rent so they would get more money, so they could have more ready cash. but that would then impact their tenants. And generally those people were often also not upkeeping the properties. So it just ended up degrading their estate further and further.
Well, if the tenants weren't able to increase production, there was no way they were going to be able to pay any increased rents. So it's all about production at this time. He's living in the past. He's living in a past era.
You couldn't afford to just have an estate and let it lie. You needed to be working on it to improve it.
In those days, there was quite a revolution going on also in the production of estate management. 4-crop rotation things were coming in. There was influence from Kirk of Norfolk in how to more effectively farm. But there was a lot of resistance from some landowners to actually do that. He left his farm manager to get on and just do his thing, which is probably a good thing. So long as there was money coming in, he didn't really do anything more than he had to.
Now, this last question is interesting. How important is family in Persuasion? Does it bear any reflection on the individual? If you have also read it, consider Alongside Mansfield Park,
which we're just reading at the moment.
Yes, so perfect timing.
Family is very important, obviously. Anne only does a lot of things because of her respect for family, not necessarily for the individuals, but for family. She recognises she has a responsibility to the members of the family.
And she could have abandoned them to go and live with Lady Russell. I think there are a lot of people that question why she hasn't just done that.
Well, I think possibly Lady Russell did far too good a job of inculcating her with a sense of responsibility.
The Musgroves are a very close family, and we see that. We see how welcoming they are to Anne, how she is accepted as a member of their family.
And valued, truly valued.
And I've said it many times, and I'll say it again, if she had married Charles, I think she would have been happy.
I think she certainly could have been happy. And I think actually Charles would have grown into a stronger man. He basically spent his life avoiding his wife, really.
Does it bear any reflection on the individual? Anne doesn't fit into her family. She's a very different person from them. She has very different values.
Yes, the rest of them, even Mary, who was desperate for a sense of place, she's a chip off the same block.
Rank is very important to the Elliots at large, but not to Anne. She does show respect for rank where it is warranted. She will do the things that are appropriate. But she is a bit like Elizabeth when it comes to Lady Catherine. She's not scared of people of rank just because they have rank.
She gives them their due for their position, but she certainly doesn't worship the ground or feel obliged to follow them, as the rest of the family seem obliged to do. And she's not out to curry their favour, which is quite different. Anne actually shows the appropriate respect for family, but the rest of the family doesn't show it. They're all individuals. They don't show respect for each other in the family.
There is a lot of selfishness.
I'm not 100% sure how, if opportunity arose, just how much support Elizabeth would give her father if she had an opportunity to marry a rich man who said, but I don't want your father living with us, thank you very much. I'm not going to pay for his foibles. He can still do his thing in Bath, or, would she still up and leave?
That's a really interesting situation. You're right, I don't know how Elizabeth would act in that situation.
Because she knows as soon as her father dies, what's going to happen? I mean, her father is obviously still seems to be healthy. She's 29? So her father could be 55 maybe, so he's not an old man. And he's obviously healthy. He doesn't seem to drink too much or eat too much or anything, unlike some... there's not a lot for her to look forward to. Can you imagine that family? The two of them, when she's 40 and 50 and he's still living with them. Gosh, it would be like hell on earth for those two, wouldn't it?
They would resent each other. It says to consider it alongside Mansfield Park when it comes to family. Again, there are a lot of selfish individuals in the Bertram family. There are similarities between Fanny and Anne that they feel on the outside, and they're also quite responsible characters. They understand what is necessary and required, and they understand respect. they give respect as it is due, but the other members of the family don't necessarily.
Upbringing has a huge influence on you. And you can be all part of the same family, but quite different people, as it shows very much in Persuasion. But also Mansfield Park. Edmund is quite different to his brother.
And his sisters.
I think also what shows there is the poisonous relationship families can have. In Mansfield Park, you've got the Mrs. Norris, who's so determined to preserve rank by putting down Fanny as the poor cousin and making sure she never sees above herself. And actually is always putting herself almost in the equivalent of lady of the house. And the Crawfords, who are also the product of a completely different kind of admiral.
I mean, the Crawfords are a really interesting family, though, and they are similar in a lot of ways, and they have great loyalty to each other.
They do. They're very tight as siblings. Well, I was also thinking about the difference between Mrs. Norris and Lady Russell. Both external to family, as it were, although either close family, but the influence they had on the families were quite different. One was very positive, negative in a well-meaning way, whereas the malice, really, of Mrs. Norris is something completely. But she had huge influence over the family. And they let her do it.
Partly because Lady Bertram abdicated her role.
Totally abdicated her role, did not take any responsibility. For all Mary's irritation, she did take her role quite seriously. Even if she was a bit of a hypochondriac, if she didn't think she was getting enough attention. But she obviously, when she chose to, she could display plenty of energy and get on and do things. She just needed to be valued. Lady Bertram didn't care two hoots.
She just wanted to look pretty and sit on a sofa. And that is our close of our discussion on Persuasion.
What are we going to do next week?
Next week, we think we're going to start on Mansfield Park.
I don't know. Shall we? Are we?
We might start on Mansfield Park, or we might start on some of the juvenilia. Tune in and see. My name is Frances Duncan. You can find me at francesduncanwrites.com and on Twitter at Frances_Duncan. And if you want to be part of our Mansfield Park group read, please contact me. Thank you for listening, and we wish you happy reading.